Well, good morning and welcome once again. You're tuned to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my twice weekly webcast. Got a fairly short one today because I need to get off fairly pronto and head off to Heathrow to drop my brother off, who's visited for a few days and he's on his way back to the west coast of America, where I dare say it will be a much nicer day than it is here at the moment. We seemed to have a bit of a flash flood last night, which was rather odd because it didn't seem to be wet many other places in London as I was out. But it's a bit of a grey and dull start this morning and pretty chilly too. But on with the show. What have we got for you? Well, in today's show, we've got a story about a US servicewoman who is actually going to stand trial in the UK after a collision which resulted in a motorcyclist's death. We are giving you the story of bikers in France who are holding mass protests over the Controle Technique ruling. The e-motorcycle race, I should say an e-race. It was the e-motorcycle that got across London the quickest, probably not very surprisingly. We'll be asking if Honda are planning a folding e-bike, and we'll also be looking at a plan from Yamaha to make bike parts from an advanced cellulose reinforced resin. And then finally, today's final item on the show, we'll be looking at the accident top 10. We'll be coming back to that, number 3, which is all about the oncoming car turning right across our path. Right, now then, I somehow managed to fail to get the story up in my little notes about the bike control thing, but I've got it on the other screen, so I'll just read it off there. Right, first then, thing is first, don't forget the live online talk series. December's event is Wednesday, 7th of December at 8 p.m. Tickets are a £5, and it is all about the science of being seen. It's the full presentation, which I will come back to. Again, just to give you the full ins and outs, all up to date with the latest science. There will be some updates to that. So do pop along for that if you possibly can. It's also will be useful if you stay to the end and catch the riding, the crash tip, which I'll be covering later. We've got Clive looking in. Morning, Clive. And Mad Cockney, who says, that's Jeff, if I remember correctly, says it's 2 degrees here in northeast Wales. It is definitely a little bit chilly. Definitely got the radiators on this morning. So, okay. So the second thing to remind you is that it has been, of course, Black Friday week, and I've been running a series of offers over the last few days, from Tuesday, in fact, last week, right up till Monday morning. Now, what we had, if you recall, Monday, it was a pre-order offer. Get a copy of my Riding with the Devil book, and you'll get the follow-up, Wing and a Prayer, when I have finished writing it, which is just about, I've nearly done it. So you'll get 2 books there for the less than half price of £7.50. Sunday, 1 hour online coaching session at just 25% of the normal price, just £10. Saturday, brand new mini ebook, a masterclass book, and it tackles basically a question I've been asked for years: how do I get better in corners? And it gives you 10 days worth of planning in order to do that. So one perhaps to read over the winter and then start to put into practice in the spring. Friday gives you access to rewind recordings of 2 of the online talk series that, as I just mentioned, was next one's coming up in December. This one covers 2 talks which got some good reviews: fixing cornering problems and riding systems. You can order those online. Thursday, that was a very special one. Very limited number of these available. If you buy a 1-day course, £265 for a 1-day course, I will give you a second day entirely free. So you'll save £230 on that. The only proviso is you do have to be taking the course from one of my local start points next year. Wednesday is a survival skills paperback, which I will post out to you, and you will also get an online coaching session for just $29.99. So basically that's the book a little bit under the normal posted price, and you get that free online coaching session. And finally, the one that's been most successful, lots of people bought this, the Tarmac Tactics ebook is available for less than half price. So all those are available to order online. Do pop over there, have a look and see what's on offer, and do remember they won't be back for another year, so hopefully a few of you will head over and grab those offers. Now on with the news. A judge has ruled that a US servicewoman accused of killing a motorcyclist by careless driving can be tried in the UK. Now, you probably remember the very high-profile case involving Anne Sakoulis, who did eventually stand trial in the UK. This is a second case. This involved a rider called Matthew Day. He was a 33-year-old. He was riding along the A10 near Downham Market in Norfolk on August the 26th this year, when he was in collision with a red Honda Accord. Now, that car was driven by 24-year-old Michaela Hayes, and Hayes is an airman first class in the US Air Force, and she requested a trial in a US military court, but the Deputy Senior District Judge Tan Ikram has ruled that she will be tried in a UK court for causing death by careless driver. Now, the circumstances of this, barrister Andrew Cogan had argued that his client should be tried in the US because the collision happened while she was wearing uniform and was thus on duty as she made the 30-minute journey from RAF Lakenheath in Suffolk to her home accommodation, which is also paid for by the US Air Force. And the USAF had served what's known as a Crown Prosecution Service with a certificate under the 1952 Visiting Forces Act, and they can use that to assert jurisdiction in a legal case. But the judge actually agreed with the prosecutor, Rachel Scott, who insisted that Hayes was no longer on duty because she was driving home. And the judge explained his decision. He said there's no additional payment for the journey home. There's no evidence the fuel for her journey was paid for by the US Air Force. She paid for the fuel herself. And whilst the accommodation may have been paid for by the US Air Force, he said, I do not find that a factor as to whether she was on duty. She was simply travelling home after a day at work. Now, when you consider all the circumstances, then his conclusion was this particular journey and the collision did not arise out of or in the course of duty. So the contents of the US Air Force certificate were therefore rebutted, and he said the court must move on to the next stage of proceedings, and she will be due to appear at Norwich Crown Court on December the 21st. Right, now, if you do get the chance, as I said, make sure that you pop over to these shows on a regular basis. They are on Wednesdays and Sundays. That's when they appear. Nearly always live, very occasionally recorded, and even more rarely I do miss a show. If you want to catch up, the easiest way to do it is head to my YouTube channel, which is Survival Skills UK, and you can find all of the shows there in their own stream. Right, now the other story, the one that I've managed to leave off my crib notes, which run on the laptop screen, which I'm looking at right at this moment, is that bikers are protesting in France against the new two-wheeler Controle Technique. Now, this is the diktat that across Europe, motorcycles over the 125cc in size will have to have some form of MOT test, basically the equivalent to the UK's MOT, a technical inspection at regular intervals. And the French have been protesting that for some considerable time. And although there was a ruling in the courts that the ruling had to be applied, the president, Emmanuel Macron, you may remember, stepped in and actually vetoed that ruling, saying he didn't want to upset the French at that particular time. But the case has gone back to the courts, and the senior court in France has ruled that, in fact, France must apply these tests to motorcycles. And not unpredictably, it's kicked off a big fuss from French bikers who have been protesting across France. And the figures are given as 1,400 protesters in Lyon on Saturday, 900 in Toulouse, 850 in Bordeaux. There were also protests in Paris. That was on Sunday, which don't have figures for that. Montpellier, 1,500 riders were out on the streets protesting, and there were also big protests in Lille, Caen, La Roche-sur-Yon, Rennes, Perpignan, Reims, and Strasbourg. And some riders apparently were driving their bikes very slowly on local roads. Others assembled their bikes in front of the council buildings, showing placards. So that is what the problem is. The Fédération de Français motorcyclist en colère, I believe they are, it's the FFMC. They say that less than 0.3% of motorbike accidents are due to a mechanical fault, and basically they say that the tests are therefore unnecessary. And they also say that motorcyclists will regularly check their motorcycles before they go riding, and so why should they have to pay for a test that somebody else can do when they can do it themselves? Do I have sympathy with that? Well, I don't really. To be perfectly honest, there are things that show up on an MOT that riders don't spot. I've been standing there waiting to get my bike MOT'd, and I've seen some horror stories going on with riders turning up with bald tires, knackered brake pads. My favourite one, I think, was one of those old C90 step-throughs. The MOT tester failed it on structural integrity, and the rider protested there was nothing wrong with it, and the tester actually sort of said, look, there's rust here on the frame, and he poked the paint and his finger went clean through. The thing was rusted completely from the inside out. So yeah, I would hope that control tests would pick up things like this. So yes, most cyclists should keep their bikes in order, but really that doesn't excuse us from having our vehicles regularly tested, in my opinion. Feel free to argue with me on that one if you want to. Right, okay, so if you have anything to say, of course I'm more than happy to respond during the show, or I'll try to get back to you after the show, but do drop me a line. Anything of interest, I'm always happy to see what you've got to say. All right, okay, so let's move on rapidly to the next story, and this one is again sort of interesting exploration of what electric vehicles can do for us in our cities. And as you can see, here are a bunch of them. You can see there is a sort of a step scooter in front. There is a sort of lightweight, very lightweight moped thing, electrically assisted bicycle, a proper motorcycle, and back right corner there's what's known as a quadricycle. It looks like a little car, but it's actually taxed and assessed as a motorcycle. And then there's the Porsche in the middle. So what happened? Well, they were set off from Move Electric's headquarters in Twickenham, and they were sent to go to the Olympic Park in Stratford in East London, which basically means you've got to get from one side of London to the other. It's about 18 miles if you go through central London, and the vehicle that managed to get there quickest was in fact the Super Socco motorcycle you can see standing just in front of the Porsche Taycan, which was the next vehicle across the line, around 20 odd minutes behind. And then there was the S-Scooter SX 250 pedal assisted electric bike. So that's presumably the one with the lady in the sort of turquoise and pink jacket. She managed it in an hour and 36 minutes. The Go Cycle G4, which is, I guess, the thing with the box on the back of it, managed it in an hour and 43 minutes. But the rider had to do most of the ride without electrical assistance, we're told, because a safety feature had shut the moto down. So, all right, that's what that was all about. The competitors plan their own route, and the vehicle or the race actually included the electric rental scooter. I'm not entirely sure why, because it couldn't finish the race because of the Stratford, where the race finished, is outside Transport for London's e-scooter rental scheme. So basically the thing gets so far and just stops. So a little bit pointless. The Super Socco's got a top speed of around 60 miles per hour. It's got a range of up to 60 miles, 5 kilowatt electric motor, 2.7 kilowatt electric battery. So it's not a, it's obviously a pretty good in-town commuter. The Citroen Ami was the fifth and last, and that took an hour and 54 minutes. It seems the driver opted to take the route through central London traffic, because I believe that it's also restricted to 28 miles per hour like a moped. The quickest route turned out to be the much longer 30-mile route via the North Circuit, and that's certainly one followed by the Super Socco and the Porsche. Right, now continuing on our electric theme. Oh, Sue's looked in. Good morning. And so is Petro. Hello, both of you. He says, agree the MOT helps machines roadworthy. I don't understand the logic of classic bikes once old enough not to pay road tax. I think they also become MOT exempt. They indeed do. My 1980 CB250, which is parked outside, is actually now more than 40 years old, so I will actually get the historic exemption for it. That means I have to buy road tax, but I have to pay precisely £0 and 0 pence to purchase it. But I do actually have to make the effort to get road tax for it, which is a slightly bizarre situation. But it presumably means that the government could reverse the zero tax allowance if they wanted to. And you're absolutely right. I have to declare that it is roadworthy, but that's all I have to do. Right, now continuing on the electric theme, I did mention in a previous show that Honda had trademarked the name Moto Compacto with the United States Patent and Trademark Office back in July 2020. That was one of the earlier shows that we did in lockdown. Now, the use of the name was connected to the short-lived Moto Compo, which was a fold-up bike, which was designed to live in the boot of a city compact Honda car and thus provide last mile transport. You basically park the car somewhere where you could park it, hoiked the bike out the boot, unfolded the seat and the handlebars, and rode off on these wee machines. Now, the production run didn't last very long, 81 to 83, but they actually made around 50,000 of them, which is a pretty serious number, actually. The new trademark describes the vehicle as an electric scooter, and Honda have now grabbed two new trademarks in Canada, which one of which shows the logo for a compact looking electric scooter. Now, Honda have promised to roll out 10 new electric motorcycles and electric scooters by 2025. So that's quite a task for them. One of which will be the new EM1 scooter, and this is that particular model with a dummy apparently sitting on top of it. That was seen in Milan. It uses the new swappable Honda mobile power pack as the battery. The main drawback of that power pack is, as you see in the plinth next to the bike, is it is pretty tiny, and that bike only has a range of about 25 miles or 40 kilometers, which is rather more restrictive, I have to admit, than I was expecting. And the problem is, if you want to go any further, you either need to find a battery swap station, which don't exist as yet, except for one in Tokyo, or you recharge. So I think that they are going to struggle with that right for the moment. And it's likely that if that new Moto Compacto e-bike does appear anytime soon, it will probably use that swappable battery pack too. So the limited range might make more sense actually in a bike that can be carried in a car boot, because if you think about it, you may even be able to use the car to recharge the bike while it's in the boot. But it would definitely be a good way to adapt to the sort of clean air zones which are only accessible by green powered vehicles. All right, okay. Now I was just going to put up a thing that said, don't forget, if you want anything to read, you can actually pop over to my Lulu page, and you can find paperback books over there. As I've mentioned, there is one offer which I am doing. I'm delivering them personally from here. I'm sending them off from here. But if you want my paperbacks, they are always available on my Lulu page. Do pop over there, have a look and see what's available. All right, now wood. It's an amazingly strong structural material. It derives its strength from a natural polymer called cellulose, which basically makes up the cell walls of plants. Cellulose is a long chain polymer. It's made up of glucose materials which are joined together, and basically it is constructed simply from carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. And we're all probably familiar with cellulose-based products like cotton and paper. Another cellulose product is cardboard, and you may remember from some considerable time ago now that due to a shortage of plastic, the dashboard and the door trims of various Soviet era cars were actually made of a form of cellulose. Now, the use of cardboard basically in those vehicles was ridiculed by the West, but various people did actually sit up and take note. And it's now just been announced that Yamaha are to begin using plant-derived cellulose nanofiber in the production of specific watercraft parts and engines. The use of the material is designed to reduce the company's environmental footprint, and this reinforced resin has been developed through a collaborative agreement between Yamaha and the Nippon Paper Industries Corporation. And the technical details of how it's made, basically the cellulose nanofibers are needed, which disperses them into a plastic resin, which can be made from some standard material such as polypropylene, which is probably what you'll find your side panels on your motorcycle are made of. So by mixing in the cellulose, you get something which is even stronger than the polypropylene panels, but is also 25% lighter than the existing material. So it naturally reduces the amount of plastics that are used in the product, and it also makes them more recyclable. The statement says that these CNF reinforced resins will appear in motorcycles and a wide range of other products in the near future. So, right, there we go. It seems we're having trouble streaming to Facebook. What's happened? A message has just popped up saying that the link to Facebook has broken. Right, I'll just type a little message in. Right, so what I'm going to suggest you do, if you have been watching on Facebook, is head over to YouTube and watch it over there, and catch up later if you can't see it live. So head over to YouTube, and it's still going out. So technical problem there with the streaming software. Right, I will carry on anyway. We've just got to the final item of today's relatively short show because I need to get off to Heathrow fairly soon. And this one is about the, we're back to the top 10 crashes. We're at number 3 now, and this is the oncoming car that turns right across our path. And this is the genuine killer accident at junctions. Now, the scary bit is that hardly anybody knows about it. Ask any rider from CBT upwards about where they're at risk, and the vast majority of those will know all about the time-honoured "sorry mate, I didn't see you" Smidsy collision, the one where the vehicle pulls out from the rider's left into the rider's path as the vehicle plans to turn right, usually. That's the classic Smidsy. But in urban areas, this isn't the crash that's likely to kill you, me, or any other rider. And I'll freely admit that even after all my dispatching time in London or my instructor training, I hadn't figured this out either. And it wasn't actually till I attended a bike safe course with the Met Police back in 2002 that I actually got to see the figures. Though the classic car pulls out from the left Smidsy crash is far more common, they make up around 70% of all urban accidents. They only make up 1 in 12 of the capital's fatalities. So the classic Smidsy with the car that pulls out from your left, lots and lots of crashes, 70% of all urban accidents, but only around about 1 in 12 of all fatalities. Now, why is this? Well, the answer is when you think about it for several reasons. The collision generally happens at low speed because usually even an inexperienced rider will see it coming and will manage to get some speed off, even if we don't stop completely. So the car itself might be a virtual brick wall when we run into it, but importantly, it's not actually moving towards us. So the only speed involved is the speed of the motorcycle. And riders become pretty aware of this potential crash pretty early on in their riding career, and they're generally on guard against it. And of course, the result is that there are instances where riders evade the vehicle altogether. But the really, really dangerous crash is the other one. It's where the oncoming vehicle will turn right across the rider's path. Now, according to the figures for the Met, which I have no reason to doubt, they were questioned recently online by people from other countries, but in London, the Met Police suggest that this particular crash accounts for nearly 50% of the total of deaths. So what is it that makes this collision with the oncoming car turning right across our path that makes it such a threat? And well, when I came back from that course with the Met, I had to think about this, and I thought these are the likely reasons. Now, first one is the looked but could not see reason. If you're familiar with Science of Being Seen, you'll know what I'm talking about here. The bike is simply not where the driver can see it. Now, think where we are advised to approach junctions on the near side. As soon as we do any advanced training, we're generally told out towards the centre line because it improves the view into the junction on the left. But what does that do to lines of sight to a vehicle approaching from the opposite direction? Well, of course, it makes us harder to see, but it also means we often don't see the vehicle that's about to turn in front of us. If there's a bus or a truck in that oncoming stream, there is a really good chance that the driver will be completely unaware that we're there, and we won't know it's there either. I had a fairly long correspondence with a rider from MAG on this issue. He'd been put in touch with me by Ian Much, who edits the Road magazine, which I post my column to. And he just managed to swerve to avoid the car as the driver saw him at the last moment, and the car stopped the turn, but it was already partially blocking the lane. Now, he was doing what he'd been told by his IAM observer. He'd seen a junction on the left, he'd seen a car coming up to that junction, he'd positioned wide out to the right, but he basically put himself in the blind spot of the oncoming driver who thought he was looking at an empty bit of road. At 60 miles per hour, because that was the speed limit on this particular road, it would probably have been game over for him and his wife had he hit that car. So there is the second issue, looked but failed to see. Now, this goes back to all the issues I talk about on Science of Being Seen, and I might remind you the next presentation is on Wednesday if you do want to find out what I mean by all this. But essentially, not everything that is visible will be seen. It's not that drivers don't look properly. It's a fundamental problem with our visual system. It has limits. It has the inability to see things in peripheral vision. If we're not looking in the right place, we won't spot things. And there's often simply too much to focus on. Motorcycles do go missing. Tune in on Wednesday if you want to find out more about the idea that drivers don't look properly and why I think that is killing motorcyclists. The third issue is looked, saw, and misjudged speed and distance. The all-important calculation that we all make when turning into gaps in queues of vehicles is time to collision. And as Science of Being Seen also explains, drivers misjudge the speed of motorcycles more often than they will misjudge the speed of a truck or a car. And that's simply because of the tall, thin shape of the bike. As it gets closer, it grows vertically, whereas a car, being thin and fat, tends to grow in the horizontal plane rather than upwards. And it just turns out that we are not very good at spotting things that grow that way. We're much better at spotting things that grow that way. So we underestimate the speed of motorcycles, and we all tend to underestimate the speed of vehicles that are moving quickly. And so if a motorcycle is moving quickly and moving more quickly than other vehicles around it, which is unfortunately what we tend to do on motorcycles, it's even more possible that the driver will simply look, see, and misjudge the time he has available. Then he'll start the turn and probably abort it halfway through, and that's when the rider's in trouble. But as I explained, collisions are by definition two to tangle crashes. One sets it up, but the other still has to ride into it. So why are riders so ill prepared to avoid this crash? Well, one reason is that the oncoming vehicle that turns right across our path, it's an accident that comes out of the blue for many of us. Not only are we not explicitly taught to look for this crash, there's nothing about it in CBT, for example. There's nothing really in the DSA manual about it, the DVSA manual. But as I said, I've found many advanced riders are also taught to consider the incident with the emerging vehicle and not the oncoming vehicle turning. So they sit in poor positions to be seen, and they don't look for the oncoming vehicle turning across them. Another reason is when it does start to happen, it develops very quickly indeed, giving the rider little time to react. And the triple whammy is that if we're not aware of a threat, our own response time is likely to be very slow. So put that all together, and many riders simply don't react in time to avoid the impact. When the impact does happen, it's a hard one. Think about it. The bike will barely have lost any speed because we haven't reacted till the very last second, and the car that's moving is also moving partly towards the motorcycle. So there is likely to be a hard frontal collision. That accounts for the serious consequences. So what can we do? Well, one, prioritize the bigger threat. Now you know that the oncoming vehicle that turns across you is just as big a threat as a vehicle that pulls out from the left, possibly even more. So think about which one you are going to prioritize. Just like the SMIDSI, there has to be an opening on the left for the crash to happen. So if there is a junction and it's empty, move right to the left. There's nothing in the junction, but there could be a vehicle turning across your path from the other direction. If there are vehicles on both sides, slow down and split the distance. But the important thing is we need to position where we can be seen. If we can't be seen, the other driver won't react to us properly. The motorcycle has a element of freedom to move around in the lane that the average car, for example, doesn't have. So use it to advantage. Slow down. You should know this by now, but the physics of speed works like this. If we double our speed, we quadruple our stopping distance. But the maths works the other way around. If we halve our speed, our stopping distance comes down to just a quarter of what it was. So even fairly modest reductions in speed have significant benefits when we turn to braking. Now, I know many riders will think I'm making excuses for drivers who should have looked harder, judged better, and not taken the risk, etc. But the truth is that for an actual collision to occur, the rider has contributed their bit by failing to stay out of trouble. We have to be honest about this. Now, one thing I will say is it's difficult, if not impossible, to practice emergency responses to real life traffic situations, because working on e-stops and swerves in the car park is valuable in as much as it teaches us what the bike can do, but it is also sterile and divorced from reality, which explains why in a real emergency so many riders fail to react in the way that they were trained. But there is a solution. I have mentioned it on a number of occasions, and it's called visualization. It's a sports psychology technique. It's been known about for several decades. And basically what you do is you sit back in your favorite armchair, you imagine you're out on the bike, and you let the situation, the sort of problem I've just described above, unfold in your mind. Run through everything that you would do to help you detect it and get out of trouble, and your brain will learn that is the way to approach these very situations. So it really is an effective method of training yourself for situations that are difficult to practice in real life. It may sound unlikely, but it does work, and it will be the topic of January's live webcast. So do head over there, and hopefully we'll see you at that talk on the in January. I think it's going to be the second Wednesday. I haven't actually set it up yet, but probably a second one to let you recover from Christmas. Right, okay, so that's it for today. I do apologise for the disruption of those of you who are watching on Facebook. I do hope you can pop over and watch it instead on YouTube. That is it. I'll be back with another show on Sunday. So thank you again for tuning in to Survival Skills. If you are out there on the bike today, do stay shiny side up.